Hello, and welcome to the Media Copilot. It's a new podcast and newsletter about how generative AI is changing media and how the news gets made. I'm Pete Paschal, longtime tech journalist and media executive. And with this podcast, I aim to have interesting talks with fellow journalists, decision makers at media companies, and fascinating people doing interesting things with AI that all journalists should know about. I'm very pleased to welcome my guest today to the Media Copilot, Matt Martel. Matt is the general manager for business at NZME, the largest media company in New Zealand. Back in the spring, Matt made an announcement that BusinessDesk, that's one of the publications at NZME, would be utilizing ChatGPT to help power certain types of coverage and also using AI to augment price graphs. I understand he's doing some new stuff with it now, too. So I'm really excited to dive into that and all the ways the publication is using generative AI to make a faster and more efficient newsroom. So, Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Cool. So I'm really excited to get into all this. But first, we need to know, I think, a little bit more about you and NZME and everything you do. So tell me a little bit about yourself and your role there and what role NZME plays in the sort of media landscape in New Zealand.
Absolutely. So I'm just an old journalist, basically. Nothing too exciting there.
You wear well.
And I've been around so long that I was around when the internet came into media, and I was working in the UK. I had a startup doing content for the internet because we figured it would need some content. We were about 15 years too early, and went back to journalism after that, and have just watched the business model be decimated over that time, and personally made hundreds of journalists redundant in various roles. When AI came along, or when ChatGPT was released, it was just obvious it was going to be another seismic shift. And if we didn't get ahead of it, or at least embrace it, it was going to destroy us. So what happened for us is we looked at it and said, okay, what are the use cases that we have? So BusinessDesk is 4 years old now as a direct consumer brand. We were a newswire that wasn't doing so well. We got refinanced. I was brought in. A couple other people were brought in, and we relaunched, and we've done really well. So we've grown at a rate far faster than we expected. We started with 5 journalists. We now have 25. And
nice.
January.
That's in 4 years.
Yeah. So, and our advertising is growing significantly every month. Our subscribers are growing. So there was a real niche. In January of last year, we sold ourselves to NZME, which is the biggest media company in New Zealand. And we did that because they shared our vision for our journalism. The way we look at what we do is we have really traditional journalistic values. We edit everything twice. We fact-check articles. It's a level of editing that's not really common in New Zealand now.
Or anywhere, I would say. But yeah, that's impressive.
And we also have what we describe as a shit-hot tech stack. So we built our own CMS because we looked around at content management systems, and there were some that were great at hoovering up data, the big content management systems. They're just advertising machines that also you could publish articles around the advertising. Or there were the blogger software, the WordPress style stuff, which is great for editors, and great for writers, but not so good for advertising. The other part of our business model that's really odd is that we do a lot of email. So every article that we write can be sent in its entirety to a subscriber. So if you're on our site and you subscribe and you say, I want every media article, we'll send you the full article. And so we're now sending over 2 million emails a month, and we've got a 74% open rate.
Wow. So you send them individually right when they're published?
As it hits our homepage, it hits your inbox.
Interesting. Wow. Okay.
And so the CMS we built is a combination of a web, an app CMS, and an email system. So we generate digests out of it. We generate these news alerts out of it, and you can put in keywords. You can follow journalists, and it all gets emailed to you. So our most dedicated users might not ever visit our website.
Hmm.
Those emails
Right.
has 2 adverts in it, and those adverts have a phenomenally good click-through rate, and drive a lot of advertising revenue for us. And we
No, it's
still,
interesting as a sort of strategic person in newsrooms. What you're describing is a little bit of almost the dream in some ways, where by owning your own CMS and your tech stack, you're obfuscating the need to sort of, in a typical newsroom, certainly where I've worked, you'd have different systems for the content management system. You'd have different sort of email management system. You might even have a different system for photography on multimedia, and certainly that's been the case at most places I've worked. But you're describing sort of this more sort of all-in-one system where it gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of how you actually distribute the content to your audience.
That's right, yeah. And it is really the sort of secret sauce sitting in our background is that we built it ourselves. We know how it works. We've got a really good, but there's only 2 people, really good tech team who work on it. And so if we want to make changes, we can generally make them annoyingly fast for people who don't have a system like this. So,
Annoying to whom? Your competitors, or everyone just has to, in the newsroom, has to change what they're doing quickly?
I don't think we've changed the actual form. So a lot of what we do with this system is automated. There's a lot of algorithms built into it, not AI. And so the reporters will write an article, attach some photos, and the rest is done automatically. The only thing we can alter on the website, the public-facing website, is the lead story and the stories directly underneath it. Everything else is done automatically. So we've tried to remove the burden from the editing staff of having to run a website when we know it can be done better algorithmically. So then AI came along, or ChatGPT came along.
Yeah. Take me back to that. Yeah.
So the first thing was we have NZX, so the New Zealand Stock Exchange. We have their data on our site. We also have lots of other data products that we offer as part of the subscription, and we've built that up over the last few years. When we got the when we first launched, so I'm just going to get.
No worries.
When we first launched NZX data, we started getting the announcements as well. We get those announcements because as long as we're getting the announcements and publishing them, even if the NZX website goes down, they can keep trading because we're now official backup.
Now, these are announcements from the exchange or from the companies on the exchange, or is that a distinction without a difference? Or
it's announcements that the companies give to the exchange, so profit announcements, key staff changing.
Makes sense.
So we keep them all. We put everything on a server, and we just kept it thinking, one day we're going to need this. And then we looked at ChatGPT's summarization tools, and we thought, well, there's an obvious thing we can do here. Because of the way we work, we had 2 people rostered on to process sort of press releases each day. We expect journalists to produce 3 stories a day, 3 stories a week, and to also just churn out any press releases that we need to cover, and do that quickly.
And these are the things that the announcements that are coming from the NZ, they just sort of obviously prioritize the ones they can actually get to.
Yep.
And quickly write them up, right?
Yeah, and press releases and things like that. But so we'd have 2 people a day rostered on to do this. And I don't know about you, but I didn't become a journalist to churn press releases. And so we
not too many people did.
No.
Yeah.
I do know one guy. And
we'll get to clone that guy.
So we built the system. We built it in about 2 weeks. And then it took another week or so to build the ability to send the announcement to OpenAI and to get it back into our system. So we ran it for 3 months just on our email. So internally we would receive emails with any announcement. And then we included people from the Financial Markets Authority in New Zealand, and we included people from the Stock Exchange, just so that we knew we were on solid ground.
Yeah, so when you say internally, it was only to your staff at first. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
And so you were just, and then you sort of expanded it slowly to sort of, I guess, the main stakeholders in the announcements, and then sort of put it further out. And now they just go out, right?
Yeah. So then once we were happy with it, we put a block on the homepage, stories generated by AI. And we used AI to create a reporter's byline, which we call BIDI, BDAI. And so BIDI now processes those NZX announcements in about 30 seconds. So it's often less than that. And so it used to take us 30 minutes, including a couple of edits and a fact check to make sure we hadn't copy and pasted wrong. It's now 30 seconds. On day one, we went through our archive and we wrote 2,700 stories. And then we realized
My goodness.
Then we realized that the prompt we'd changed to the day before, we'd been a little bit too clever with it. And so we deleted those stories, went back to the original prompt, and wrote 2,700 more stories. And
wow. And so I got to ask you, so now that you obviously did some prompt design or engineering or whatever you want to call it to make your prompt, that's interesting to hear. Love to hear a little bit more about that. But I have to ask, so now you do these stories through the AI, they're done in 30 seconds. Do you have, or do you even need any human between the sort of output and it sort of going out, or is the nature of the story and the process such that that's no longer necessary? And if first clarify if there is a human involved in that step, and then why you decided there was, or there needed to be, or there shouldn't be.
There's no human involved. It just
okay.
The reason for that is this is a statutory filing to a stock exchange. So not like somebody's trying to pull the wool over our eyes with a press release or something like that. So we've told ChatGPT, do not add any more details. Just take this and turn it into a news article.
Got it. So one of the key things is that this is a distinction I like to make all the time when I talk about AI, is that by the nature of the prompt and the nature of the exercise, this is purely a language task. This is not a knowledge task. It's not mining its, training data or whatever and bringing new information to this. It is purely looking at the information that's there and essentially formatting it in a way that your readers want.
That's correct. And it's clever enough that if a company might put some information in the seventh par of a NZX announcement so they can say, hey, it's out there. It will see that and it will bring it up to the lead. It is journalistically rewriting this content.
So it's finding the nuggets too. It's not just doing it in the same format. It's not like, oh, this is the news, 7 paragraphs down, not the things the junk they were saying in the first 6. Interesting.
Yeah. So I think
impressive.
The example I use is one of the property companies that's listed, or commercial real estate companies, put out a release saying their profit is going to be down, but they are doing everything they can to fix that. And then almost at the end of the press release, it said that there is strong demand for green buildings, and that's where they're making their money now. What the AI did was make that the intro. And we've seen this again and again, and it was one of our senior editors who's ex-Bloomberg and all these famous places. She's been looking at it. She says, I can't understand how this works. I mean, it's so good, and it keeps getting better. So initially we wrote articles, then we wrote the headlines as well, and now it just kind of runs in the background, and we are looking at what else we can do. And I can tell you a little bit more about our AI.
Yeah. Well, I have so many questions, but the first one is, when you went into this project, how was the staff sort of regarding GenAI, particularly since you were doing this like in the spring, right? So this is kind of the period that I associate with sort of the early forays into generative content. And it's, they're sort of very infamous now with some articles on CNET being plagiarizing, and other ones just sort of, cranking out and not being just up to spec as what you would think is a good piece of journalism. And so I feel like this was an era where everyone was sort of approaching this with a lot of caution. And there was probably a lot of skepticism, I would imagine, even in your newsroom. How did you overcome that? And then what was sort of the evolution, I guess, of the newsroom's attitude toward AI, given that environment, and then how it turned out?
There's two things. One is the how the newsroom reacted, and the other is the brand risk if we get it wrong. And then there's also, because it's market data, there's also a legal risk if we get it wrong.
Yes.
So looking at the newsroom, because we've built our own tech stack, because we've grown so rapidly, and because we've got a culture that I think is strong, we're able to have conversations. You didn't become a journalist to process press releases or NZX announcements. We're not telling you can't if you think you can do it better and you've got time. But we can see that processing something someone else has written is an easy task. There is no way that an AI can do a lot of the real journalism that we do. And we've had an example of that in the last couple of days. So there's a large listed company, Fletcher Building, and our investigations editor, Victoria Young, found out some stuff about them and worked on that for about 3-4 weeks and got to the point of ringing them and saying, here's what I've found out, and we're going to publish today or tomorrow. They put the phone down and they put one of the largest companies in the country into a trading halt until they dealt with it. It's a level of influence that we've kind of wanted for a long time, since launch. It's a real good marker of our growth. There's no way an AI could have done that story. There's no way an AI can work with a contact over 6 weeks and slowly get the nuggets out, earn the trust, and break real journalism. That's what we want to be doing. We want exclusive stories. We don't want to be following anyone else, and that's AI allows us to do more of that work, that exclusive journalism that is going to drive our subscriptions, drive our brand, and allow us to be more profitable and have more journalists and to do better work. And
you mentioned earlier that the sorry to interrupt, but the two people you would assign each day just to kind of go through sort of a lot of this rote stuff. I imagine, I don't know if that practice is just not happening anymore or it's just been re-examined. Because exactly what you're saying is like, this is sort of the promise of AI. It's doing this rote stuff that frees up journalists to do real journalism.
Yeah, that's it. And so we just don't have those tasks, or we do have them in a limited capacity now as far as what we used to call the hit desk. So the newsroom got that once they understood it, that we were supplementing what they do, and that we're not putting our brand at risk by saying to the AI, add context from our archive or anything like that. It's really just a news summarization system in the same way that they would do. And then we also have to make sure it's highly accurate, because even one mistake might make a company lose a couple of $1 billion off its book value, or a couple of million. So one of the things we found is if we sent a NZX announcement to the AI and it didn't have a full stop or a full point at the end, the AI would hallucinate. So as simple as we had to change our script to make sure that anything we sent had a full stop at the end. And these are the kind of things we learned as we went along. And
I would imagine that was in the internal phase.
No, it wasn't. It was after launch. It wasn't long after launch, but as soon as we saw it, we just paused and we fixed it that day and worked out why and fixed it and moved on. We're pretty comfortable as an organization with things not being perfect at launch. With this, we put a huge amount of effort in it, but we've just launched we're launching it this week, a new phone app. And it is so much better than our old one. And we know it won't be perfect, but because we're so close to our subscribers and our readers, they'll let us know really quickly, and we can fix that really quickly.
So how have you expanded the role of AI, and what do you, without revealing any secrets, I guess, where are you looking to go with it
I don't.
in the coming weeks and months, I guess.
I don't really remind. I don't really mind revealing secrets because
Then do it. Give me all the secrets.
so at the moment we have just launched a ChatGPT based recommendation engine. So in a lot of content management systems, if you want to recommend another article to read or a related story, you'll do that manually. You'll find it. We've always done that algorithmically. We've now changed that to a proper AI. So when you see the recommended stories on BusinessDesk, they're all generated by AI. As part that was a benefit of another system we've been working on that's not actually launched yet, which is an AI-based search engine. So instead of our current poor search engine, you'll be able to ask it a question. So you'll go in and you say, what is the share price of Sinlay? It will tell you. Who is the Prime Minister of New Zealand? It will tell you. And then you'll also see the articles and the references that we have for that data. We're then going to apply that AI to our CMS and it will start doing editing for us, write headlines for us. In the CMS at the moment, when we say that a fact is correct, we make it red. We just change the color to red. Soon we'll run a script over every article we have, and we will generate topic pages and people pages based on those colors. And then we'll use AI to keep that up to date. So if you write Chris Hipkins, who's currently Prime Minister of New Zealand, and you spell it a different way, the AI will look at that and say, hang on, we have a topic page for something close to this. Did you spell that correctly? And so it will help us with our fact checking. And then the next thing, which we should be launching, I would say February of next year, will be an entirely new product. And we've got in the sort of beta stage a tool that looks at government select committees. So, Senate, the equivalent in the US would be Senate hearings. So
I see.
In New Zealand, a big law change, you might get 30,000 submissions. Most of them are just forms that people have filled in. So the AI will go through every submission and it will provide summaries of those submissions. Some of them are 100 pages, they're huge.
Sure.
And so you'll be able to select a 100-word submission or 200-word submission. It will then do sentiment analysis and provide that graphically. And then we will do some work on looking for common themes and trying to detect whether there's been some kind of government relations firm or lobbying firm has written a whole lot of them and there's similarities to them. So we're able to see what's happening within those select committees. And that's of value to subscribers because you might have, if you're, say, a communications firm or a big company or even a government body, you need to know what every single submission says. So we're going to give you that as a service as part of your subscription.
That's really impressive. That sounds like a lot of, are all these features reader facing? Are some of them purely for news gathering or? You mentioned the stuff in the CMS, obviously that's internal, but creating the tag pages automatically, that's obviously a consequence of that.
Yeah.
But I was thinking specifically of like sort of looking at the government documents. That's something that you said that's a service you're going to offer to your readers.
Yeah, so that'll be offered to readers once we're happy with it. The prototype we have works really well. We just got to productionize that. And if that works, we're able to do that with, say, local government. As journalists' numbers have declined, there's a lot less coverage of local government. And so they have their own committees and things like that. We'd be able to get those submissions and those committees and use AI to turn that into journalism. This is the kind of journalism way that we would need to edit.
Yes. Couldn't just immediately, because it's not in a standard format. And I guess the way you're kind of extracting information would need a human to check it out. But definitely takes a lot of the burden off, the sifting through things and trying to find the nuggets. This is huge. There's so many different applications you're talking about, and you have the existing ones. I'm going to say this in the broad question, but be as specific as you like on any of this. And it is, how do you measure success? Right. So obviously, with doing the NZX announcements as content. You can rapidly ramp up the actual number of things you're able to cover. I'm not sure. So that seems a little obvious to me in terms of like, are one of the readers satisfied? Also, like you just have more content to index, I guess, and like people can find it. I don't know if that's your model. I don't know how much your model it cares about traffic, so to speak, and CPM advertising, but it sounds like it's mostly subscriber based. But back to the question, like there's a lot. How are you measuring the success of any of these efforts, and how do you judge on sort of are any of them worth the effort? I guess.
We've got a framework for that. We actually work with Google and a company called Bastion Transform out of Australia to develop an innovation framework. And so we measure success in that way. I think that framework is actually going to be made public at some stage. And that's quite a traditional change management framework when it comes down to it. And then we look at subscriptions. So we want to attract people, we want to convert them, and we want to retain them. The articles that will attract a subscriber are different to the articles that will retain a subscriber. And
Okay.
mass traffic does not mean there's no metric that we have that says if we get 100,000 people to read an article, we will get 26 subscriptions.
Right. They're not the amount of traffic. What you're saying is not really related to the number of people that will actually subscribe.
Yeah, and so we still don't really have what you would call a North Star metric. Like I know that a deep article on infrastructure or the energy market might generate 10 subs and 200 people look at it. So we don't kind of know what success looks like, and we're still, I think, too young as a publisher to really be able to say this was successful or not. We know that our churn rate for our corporate subscribers, we've lost 1, and we've now got about 300. So our churn rate there is almost non-existent. And the churn rate for our individual subscribers, which is about a third of the base, is very low as well. So
yeah, it sounds like one of there's probably multiple measures of success here, but one of them seems like increasing the stickiness of your platform.
Yeah.
And just making sure like people stay loyal, that you're giving them the content they want and more of it with whatever their subscription fee is. That's great.
And we've massively increased the price of the subscription this year as well, and that hasn't really seemed to have harmed us. So people do see the value in it. The other thing that the AI has given us is actually media coverage and people talking about us. So
guilty.
Although we're part of a big company and that we can use our assets to promote BusinessDesk and our other brands, what we've found is as soon as we did this, I got probably half a dozen or a dozen invitations to speak to people about it. It was, PR industry groups or a board or things like that. I've got an event next month where people are actually paying to hear me speak, which I still find ludicrous. Just phone me up. And so that has allowed us to improve brand awareness, which is a big metric for us. Our brand awareness was something like 27% a year after launch, and it's now heading towards 60%. So the more people think of us as really good journalists who are doing clever things, the more they're going to like us, because we're not stuck in the past. So we want to be seen as a modern brand and a modern approach to journalism.
Nice. I would say it might seem like a minor thing, but I think one thing we didn't touch on is you have your price charts and you have, I think, the summaries on, well, it's hard to explain. Maybe I should have you explain it, but I found them, they struck me because I used to work at CoinDesk. Price charts were a big deal there. And it was just really cool to see realized an idea that I had evangelized there, which is mixing the news with the chart itself. So you have sort of event sort of moments on that chart. And each one of those moments, you click on it and you get a summary of what that moment is. And as I understand it, that's generated by AI as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So that's the fever chart, which shows you how the stock price has moved over the past year or so, up to 5 years. And now, whenever there's been an announcement, you can we put a little diamond on it, and you can click that, and it shows you a story. We have thousands of those stories we've written now, and that's, again, it just helps us appear to be innovative and do new things. It was an idea I had for a long time, and the first iteration of it that we did was just terrible. Really, the UX, and this was me. The UX didn't work, and so we didn't even launch it. We went back to the drawing board, and then one of the developers said, "Well, why don't we just put like a diamond on the base?" It's like, oh, yeah, okay, fine. That's such not a good idea and so simple, and I'm obviously an idiot. So thank you very much. And we're able to launch it a few days later. What we're trying to do is show what moves the market.
Right. Exactly.
We're trying to have enough influence that we can move the market, which we're now starting to see we can do. And that's
the
one
dream,
of the really good leading indicators of future success for us is influence. So when we're being quoted by former prime ministers or CEOs, or people are screen grabbing our stuff and putting on LinkedIn because they want everyone to read it, it's the same. And so that innovation with the stock market graphs is just part of that.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of what you're describing with this and other features, it's one of these things where financial news just seems really conducive to this kind of technology. Obviously, speed matters a lot. That correlation, like you said, the story and the market movement, and just kind of analyzing things either along sort of a dimension of a sector or a company, so which is something AI and technology is really good at building those associations. Makes sense. So it feels right that financial news is sort of at the forefront of this.
Yeah, I mean, dealing with data it's easy, and if we take the data from the stock exchanges and we all our other data, and then we put it into a big database, and we have written our own APIs to act as middleware, basically. So we hold so much data, and there's so much we can do with it, and that's what we're starting to see with the AI work, and the share market graphs are a big part of that, and we'll see what we can do, particularly around superannuation, which is private superannuation. It's called KiwiSaver here, and it's a massive growth area because every day people are putting a little bit more money of their salary, 3% of your salary goes into it. So we have a product we call Fund Source, and at the moment it's pretty standard. There's graphs and comparisons and things like that. When we look at the development of that, we'll be able to use AI to do cool things. So we write a market close at the end
not till then. It sounds like you're doing a lot of cool things now.
We write a market close at the end of the day, and journalists have written that market close forever.
Right. Yeah.
Now,
very similar to a lot of places.
If we know what stocks you have, then it seems fair that we could use AI to write your own market close. So we can send you an email at the end of the day, and it will say your stocks are up by 7%. Air New Zealand is down because they have said that fuel prices are rising and the Kiwi dollar is weak, and so their economic outlook is not good. This has cost you $93. If we can get to that level of data, we can do a really personalized news service.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. So I'm curious about some of the just overall decisions you make with AI. And so you mentioned you started using ChatGPT for those summaries. As you look at applying AI to more and more things, how do you sort of decide, like, essentially between models and techniques? Like, did you sort of go to OpenAI initially by default? Are you now sort of thinking about, well, there's Llama, that's a sort of open source, and there's now this Anthropic's come out with their own. Everyone's coming out with their own models, and some are purpose built, some have APIs, blah blah blah, whatever. How do you think about that? How do you negotiate that? Do you have any guidance on how to sort of choose between them?
We went to ChatGPT to begin with because it was there. It was just brand new and shiny, and it looked cool. But since then, we've moved to GPT-4. We're experimenting with Bard. because Google are a really big partner of ours. They've been really good to us as we've grown. And so they are helping us with that. And
Nice.
for us, it's got to be good enough to use. I don't want to get distracted by looking at 50,000 different models that do almost the same thing.
Yeah, I hear
So
that.
OpenAI is great. I think what Google are building with Bard is great as well. Our data editor, Andy Fires, looks at all of these things and it kind of has the same opinion as me. It works. Let's just keep moving on with what we're doing.
Is there anything about applying generative AI that scares you?
Yes, absolutely. We know that there are disinformation websites who are ripping off other real journalists, rewriting the content and then changing it, or otherwise, every 10th or 15th story is disinformation. That kind of thing is terrifying. And then if you look at the rise of paywalls and the democratization of information, that's even more scary because if you want good news, you have to pay for it now. A lot of people cannot afford to pay for it, so if they want news, they'll go to a free source. We don't, we do have a couple of good free news websites in New Zealand. I imagine, other than the government-owned one, they will all have paywalls at some stage just because of the state of the industry. That means there's a future where if you want free news, it's going to be AI generated and you're not going to be able to trust it. We have to work out a way for people who can't afford to pay for news to actually get news. And to me, that is a big part of the sort of AI future is how do we make sure that you're not just relying on something generated by a bot and you can't trust it because it's surfaced on a Facebook or somewhere like that. And so it's the faking and the skimming of real news and tweaking it, I think, is a big concern.
Yeah, you're already delving into my next question, which was like, how do you see sort of the information landscape changing over the next, 3 to 5 years as AI becomes sort of more of a player in it? You just sort of delved on some of the risks there, but maybe flip the coin a bit. Like, what excites you the most about that future?
I really like the fact that we're in New Zealand anyway. We're at the forefront of it, and we're doing something that is helping us. I want to continue to do that. There's also just some sort of cheeky, cool things we can do. Like, we're going to put AI in front of our editor inboxes. So those inboxes might receive across our group. Some of them might get 3,000 emails a day, and some poor admin person has to go through and look at them all and delete them or forward them to the right reporter. I can see us building in the next 6 months a tool that sits in front of that email inbox and it says, okay, this press release needs to go to these people. This is a complaint. It goes over here. This is just a straight announcement and it's not badly written. So I'm going to churn that as a story and put it in a queue for someone to have a look at. And these ones are going to get rejected. So once we've done that, we're able to actually take that huge amount of information that comes into us and turn it into something more useful for the organization. Allied with that, if we're getting 100 press releases a day on a specific topic area, and let's call it forestry. So we get a lot of information from forestry companies. I have no idea if we do. We can then spin up a microsite for forestry, and it can have its own branding, and it can say this is all generated by AI, but it has the NZME brand on it, whichever brand we choose, be BusinessDesk. And then we can actually launch trade publications. So if you think about all those small trade publications that are basically just getting press releases and putting them online, I reckon I could build a tool to generate 50 of those sites a day across multiple countries and hoover up a whole lot of programmatic revenue just using AI. So there's the bottom end of the journalistic market is going to be really troubled not going to be helped when cookies
Right.
replicate and programmatic advertising does whatever it's going to do. But the bottom end of the journalistic market is in trouble. And that mid to top end, where there's actual journalism and people doing interviews, and they're not just rewriting other people's hard work or quizzes or things like that, that's going to be fine.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it.
Yeah. That's really, really insightful. This has been great. I want to close with one more question, which I like to ask everybody. What is the one thing you think everyone in the media business should know about generative AI?
It has the potential to be more disruptive than the beginnings of the internet. We're going to see search engines giving answers rather than linking to our content. We're going to see a whole different set of news design and UX around user needs rather than what a newsroom thinks you need. And if you don't get in front of that now, if you don't get across it and understand it, you are going to get wiped out. Doesn't matter how big you are or what you do. Some kid in a bedroom somewhere with a good idea and some basic AI tools can start beating you at what you've been doing for 30 or 40 years. It's the biggest risk that I see. And having lived through the demise of printed newspapers and the rise of the internet and been really keen to embrace it and kind of been stopped from embracing it by the big companies I was working for, this will be the same extinction level event for media unless we get it right.
A little bit of an ominous message, but kind of hopeful. So we'll go with that.
There's plenty of people getting it right. And I think the people who don't get it right are the ones who still consider themselves to have ink in their veins and, I've always done it this way.
Right.
Yeah, you need to stop that.
Right. Need to adapt.
Yeah.
Lest the AI world consume you. Matt, this has been fantastic. Thanks so much for the conversation. I hope you'll come back sometime when, you're further along in this AI path and reveal how you and the BusinessDesk team are taking things to the next level.
Thank you very much. Lovely to talk.
All right. You have been listening to the Media Copilot. Please subscribe at mediacopilot.substack.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the Media Copilot. Be seeing you in the future.